Alrighty, hello, welcome back to the Three-Handed Bandits channel. It's Nathan with another breakdown for you today. Today we're going to be unveiling the 21st team in our 2023-2024 preseason power rankings. And today we're going to be talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Whoa, this might be a controversial take, but I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the best team in the NFC South. I think it's going to come as a shock to a lot of people. Obviously, last year was a little bit of a season from hell, but this was a team under Tom Brady that found a way to squeak into the playoffs a year removed from winning the Super Bowl. However, I do have faith that this team is going to do it again and find a way to win this division. Before we go ahead and talk about the coaching staff, the offense, the defense, and their schedule, please like and subscribe and show these videos to someone you care about. So obviously we are talking about Tampa Bay today, and I have them actually as the best team in the NFC South, even though they are the dead last betting favorite to win the NFC South. I do think that they're going to win. I have them as the best team, which I think is going to be shocking to a lot of people. However, I do think that this team had a pretty decent offseason, and I do still think that this roster has a lot of talent from that Super Bowl roster. And I do think it's a team that's going to figure some stuff out and become a good team this year. So let's go and recap their offseason real quick. So two of the big additions to this team that is going to determine their season is Dave Canales and Baker Mayfield coming over from Seattle and Carolina/LA respectively. Dave Canales obviously had a phenomenal year in Seattle, being the quarterback's coach for Geno Smith. And I do think he can have a very similar year here, restoring Baker Mayfield to a quarterback that he has shown at one point was around a top 10 guy and had the potential to kind of start pushing into a maybe elite tier. They are getting rid of Byron Leftwich, who was disappointing, was the offensive coordinator under Bruce Arians for a little bit, and did not do very good in his first year as the main play caller. And so I think overall, you're not too upset about losing Byron Leftwich, just because I don't think he showed a whole lot, and especially I do think he had a bit of a clash of styles with Tom Brady. Obviously, though, you are losing Tom Brady, who was still an excellent quarterback, but definitely was not the elite Tom Brady that we've seen in previous seasons. But I do think there are certain ways he did hold the team back last year. And I do think Baker Mayfield is going to return to the form that he's once showed us. Some other notable additions, they bring in Chase Edmonds, who not expecting a whole lot, but they bring him in as they're losing Leonard Fournette. They draft Trey Palmer in the 6th round. They're losing Julio Jones, but Julio Jones is a shell of his former self, so you're not losing much from him. They draft a 5th-round tight end in Payne Durham. They're losing Cameron Brate. They bring in Matt Filer and Cody Mauch on the O-line. They're losing Shaq Mason and Donovan Smith. Then they really targeted this D-line. They bring in Yaya Diaby, Jose Ramirez, and Kalijah Kancey all through the draft, as well as bringing in Greg Gaines to help kind of restore some of the talent on this defensive line, as they are losing Akeem Hicks and Rakeem Nunez-Roches. They also draft Servasia Dennis in the 5th round, who is a late-round draft pick that had some hype. They bring in Josh Hayes and Ryan Neal in the secondary, as well as they're losing Sean Murphy Bunting, Mike Edwards, Keanu Neal, and Logan Ryan. So overall, I do think that the roster is staying fairly consistent. I think you do have a little bit of questions about the offensive line. Then obviously with the coach and quarterback, carousel that they've gone through this season as well. But overall, I do expect that the additions they bring in are going to help this roster take strides forward. So let's go ahead and talk about this coaching staff real quick. And so obviously that's going to start with their head coach, Todd Bowles, who's going to be a very aggressive attacking 3-4 defense with a lot of schemes and blitzes and stunts to really attack and get after starting quarterbacks. This defense did take a bit of a step back last year. Todd Bowles had an excellent defense when Bruce Arians was the head coach, because he could kind of sit back and really focus on this defense. I don't think he quite has the leadership of Mike Tomlin, Mike Vrabel, Robert Saleh, some of these defensive-minded guys who can really focus on the defense but still overall have a good guiding thumb in their team. And so I do think Todd Bowles is definitely one of the lower end coaches in the NFL. But I do expect that this defense is going to take a little bit of a step up this year. But a lot of you know, the boomer bust nature of this team is also going to come down to Dave Canales a little bit. Obviously, he's unproven. He's never really been a play caller. And he's been in Seattle for like 12 years now. Kind of just seeing all the different guys kind of run through there. Very Kevin Stefanski-esque. Because, he's been with a couple different guys. And Darrell Bevell, Brian Schottenheimer, and Shane Waldron. It is expected that he's going to be another Shanahan-style scheme. As Shane Waldron was the last guy I was with. But obviously, he was the quarterback's coach that helped Geno Smith break out and reemerge as a near top 10, top half quarterback, which people were not expecting heading into the year. And we're really hoping that he can get some of that from Baker to really get him playing like he has played in the past very early into his career. But I just have a really good gut feeling. He seems like a really good guy, and it seems like he's a well-deserved hire, and it's worth throwing the dart. Just overall, I can't have too much faith in these rankings for him. I do have to be a little bit. I can't give him that much benefit of the doubt just because obviously he has never called plays before. But I do think he's going to be excellent. I think he's going to really help this offense. And, with Byron Leftwich, not like, they're going to get much worse from what it was last year. I think it's worth taking the shot on somebody that you're hoping can help kind of restore Baker Mayfield to a good quarterback. Defensive coordinator, they have co-defensive coordinators with Casey Rogers and Larry Foote. They've ran a little bit of everything, and they've both been in Tampa since 2019, but Rogers kind of been with Todd Bowles for a long time now. But it's still going to be Todd Bowles' defense, and we'll see how those other guys kind of helped impact this unit. Let's go ahead and talk about this offense, which is where a lot of this boomer bust nature of this team is going to come from. And it's going to start with Baker Mayfield. I still believe in Baker Mayfield. I know a lot of people are really, really down, but he was really excellent at the start of his career, had a couple injury issues, and then I think really lost his mojo. Not only did he have a couple injuries, that kind of made him perform a little bit worse. But then they also traded for a sexual predator and gave him $200 million even though he couldn't play. And so I do think he lost a lot of the swagger that he really needs as a quarterback. He's definitely one of those quarterbacks that kind of ebbs and flows with kind of the swagger and mojo that he's playing with. He's a player that needs to be playing with a lot of confidence. And I really think you can see in Carolina last year, he just wasn't the same guy. I don't think he was quite as invested. And also last year, he was just in a horrible situation all around. He was in Carolina with that Ben McAdoo offense, which is miserable and was really stagnant throughout the entire year. Then they cut him and move on from him. Then he goes to LA in a real dumpster fire situation. But I think you could see he wasn't quite the same guy. I think he's timid. I think he lost some of that swagger and mojo that he had. You can see even, in the first game of the season when he scores that rushing touchdown, I don't think he was quite as hyped or animated as he has been in the past. But I think that Rams win on that Thursday night football game where he, 2 days notice came in and won that game with a 98-yard touchdown drive to win the game. I really think that's going to help restore his swagger. I think he still has a great arm. He still has, good accuracy. He still has a really strong arm. So I do think Baker Mayfield is going to really step up his game this year, and he's back in another wide zone scheme, which is what he had success in at the beginning of his career. So overall, I do think part of my optimism for this team is because I am so much higher on Baker Mayfield than I think NFL media and NFL fans alike. Outside of Baker Mayfield, you got Kyle Trask and John Wolford. Not really expecting much from those guys. If they're playing, then that means Baker either got hurt or wasn't quite that good. But really, I see no reason to not stick with Baker for the entire year. Now I'll kind of talk about this receiving group. So obviously they still have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are still really, really great wide receivers. I do think they're not quite, in the top tier of guys. But I think both independently of each other are capable of being number one wide receivers on, most teams. And so I think you feel really good about having them. Obviously, Mike Evans is a bit more the traditional X kind of big body possession wide receiver. Can be a real red zone threat for this team. Then Chris Godwin's obviously your quick separator type and more of the route runner type. But overall, I still think they're both excellent wide receivers who are going to be in store for another good year. Would be a little bit concerned, though, because both of these guys do have a bit of injury issues. And there's not a whole lot of depth outside of those two guys. You got Russell Gage here, who was okay in Atlanta as the third, fourth option in the passing game. And last year wasn't really that great in Tampa. But I do think he still is going to play a little bit better than what he did last year. But overall, if he's your third or fourth option, you feel a lot better. But if Mike Evans or Chris Godwin do go down and he is kind of your one or two option, then you will be a little bit worried about this passing game. And then they also bring in Trey Palmer, as well as having Devin Tompkins, David Moore, and Kylan Geiger here as well. I'm really not expecting a whole lot from these guys if they do end up getting out there. But obviously, you're hoping Mike Evans and Chris Godwin stay healthy. Not sure how many games we actually are expecting them to fully play. But you're injury prone until you're not. So hopefully you can get a full season, or at least most of the season, out of these guys. The tight end room is not very good, though. You got Cade Otton, who's a real low-end starter. And then Kokeeft and Payne Durham, not really expecting much from them either. And in the receiving game, Chase Edmonds and Rashad White are decent receiving backs. And then Sean Tucker or Ronnie Brown can maybe give you something as some undrafted free agents. Keyshawn Vaughn's also here. I just don't think he's a very good player, but he'll probably be on the field just a little bit. So overall, I do think with Baker and these receiving weapons, as long as Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, as long as he stays healthy, I do think this passing offense is going to be pretty good. The running backs, though, it's one of the weaker running back groups in the league. I do think Rashad White can kind of have a decent year here, but he's not in any danger of being a Tony Pollard, Saquon, Derrick Henry. He's not going to be a game-changing running back for this team. But overall, I do think he's going to be an okay player for them. And I do think that the playmakers on this team are good enough to win some games as long as Baker Mayfield plays to the version that I'm expecting of him. And obviously, part of this team's struggles last year was this offensive line, which was quite weak. But I do think they're going to play a lot better this year. So it's going to start off with Tristan Wirfs, who is one of the best tackles in the league, but he's switching over to left tackle, which is a hard transition, and a lot of guys are not necessarily capable of doing it. Some can, some really can't, but I do think it makes sense. Baker Mayfield is a guy who kind of tends to drift to his left, so giving him a real elite pass protector on his backside, I think, is a very smart move from this team. And that also helps free up Luke Goedeke to switch out to tackle. Has the athleticism to play tackle a little bit, but didn't really have the play strength to play on the interior offensive line. And so as a guard last year, as a rookie, was not very good. However, in his last game, he did switch out to tackle against the Falcons and played a lot better. And so maybe you're hoping that he can continue to kind of develop and be a solid right tackle. You don't need him to be great. You just need him to not be a true weakness, which he was last year. They also bring in Matt Filer to play on the interior offensive line, and hopefully he's going to help give you another solid option. Yet again, a lower end starter, but still a lot better than what was going on last year. You also got Ryan Jensen coming back from the injury. Not really sure what you're going to get from him. Obviously, he's coming off a serious injury, and he's getting up there in age. So we don't know how well he's going to play. He was not great last year when he played, but he also came back very early from the injury. So maybe give him a full offseason to really recover. You'll get back to having great play from him. Worst case, you also got Robert Hainsey, who can step in and be a decent starter for you if Jensen isn't quite the same guy that he used to be. And then the right guard spot's going to be a little interesting. They drafted Cody Mock in the second round. Obviously, the dude from the North Dakota State who really blew up in the pre-draft process had a similar, kind of like Quinn Miners kind of develop or break out in the draft process. He does have the kind of that dickhead run mentality, but it's going to be interesting to see how he holds up to NFL caliber strength on the interior offensive line. And if he doesn't really work out as a rookie, then you have Nick Leverett, who can come in and kind of be just a guy to get in people's way. But hopefully, you're hoping that Cody Mock can develop to be a Quinn Miners-esque figure. I don't know if he fully has the strength or athleticism to be what Quinn Miners is, but I don't think he'll be necessarily a liability for this team. So I do think you feel pretty decent about this left side of the offensive line. The right side is a little bit of a question mark, but I have a good feeling that Luke Goedeke is going to figure out his tackle. And if Cody Mock is your worst piece on the interior, you can find ways to kind of protect him in the passing game. And either way, I do think he'll be at least an NFL caliber run blocker. So overall, I don't think you're going to have like a top 10 offense that's really going to be capable of winning you a Super Bowl. But I think Baker Mayfield is going to be able to kind of figure stuff out. I think a lot of the other question marks like Luke Goedeke are going to be able to figure their thing out. And I do think you're going to have a top half offense. I do think you're going to have an offense that might struggle some weeks, and if they have some injuries, will definitely struggle a lot. But I do think they're going to be a 16th ranked, a 14th ranked, an 18th ranked offense, and really help this team not necessarily rely so much on their defense. However, if you are an NFL team and you do have to rely on a defense, this is a pretty good defense to have to rely on. And it's going to start with this really excellent front seven that they have. And that real centerpiece of that is going to be Vita Vea, who is either 1A or 1B when it comes to nose tackles. Really elite at stopping the run, as this huge, absolute refrigerator Samoan dude. And he's excellent as a run defender. It's either him or DJ Reader as the top guy. But he's also a pretty decent pass rusher. Obviously, no Chris Jones or Aaron Donald, but he's more than just a nose tackle. He can actually get after the quarterback a little bit because he is such a dominant interior presence. That allows them to take a shot on Kalijah Cansey, who is obviously very undersized coming out of Pitt. Might remind you of somebody named Aaron Donald. But you'll kind of see if he's going to be able to play or not. He can either be Solomon Thomas or you're hoping he's Aaron Donald. It really just depends on how his playing strength is going to be coming into the league. But I do think he's going to be a really good player getting after the quarterback. He may be a liability in the running game, but as a rookie, I do think he's going to be a pretty good pass rusher on the interior. And then you also have Greg Gaines on the interior as well, who's a pretty good run defender, and kind of whatever, getting after the quarterback. They also have Logan Hall here. I don't think they have a whole lot of faith in. That's why they bring, William Golston back and, bring in Greg Gaines and draft Kalijah Cansey in the first round. So I don't know if they have a whole lot of faith in Logan Hall, but, he's a guy who can rotate in and be a decent player, as well as Deidre Senat, who's another kind of rotational piece on this interior unit. And then on the edge, they have a lot of interesting pieces. I think Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is going to really develop and start becoming the number one edge rusher for this team. I do think you saw that he's gotten better. He got better last year, and he was a guy that had 50 pressures. And I do think he's going to be a guy that's going to threaten to get another 50, 60 pressure season. I don't think he's going to take the strides to be, a Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, where he's getting, 100 pressures and being an absolute game wrecker. But with this D-line, with the talent they have, and hopefully with a defense that's going to be schemed up a little bit better, I do think he's going to be in store for a really good year. On the other edge spot, you have Shaq Barrett, who's just a really weird question mark for them. Obviously, his 2-year-old daughter died. Rest in peace. I just don't know what version, what we're going to get. That's very traumatic. And if that affects him on the field, I wouldn't be surprised at the very least. But I do think he's going to play. Obviously, he's coming back from injury as well. So, as he's starting to get older, older in age and coming back from, a handful of injuries, we have seen him slightly decline a little bit. But I think with Joe Tryon-Shoyinka developing on the other side and hopefully a defense that's going to play a lot better, as an overall as the unit, I do think it's going to help him kind of return to form. But worst case, if he's not quite the same guy, Anthony Nelson is a pretty decent third rotational rusher, as well as taking some shots at Yaya Diaby and Jose Ramirez, some more edge pieces for this team. So overall, I think this D-line is going to be very great at stopping the run, especially when you pair in this linebacking unit with Levante David, Devin White, and Servasia Dennis. Levante David is one of the best, 2 to 3 linebackers in the league still. Even though he's getting up there in age, he hasn't shown any signs of slowing down, so I do still think he's going to be one of the best handful of linebackers in the league. He's such a smart player. He's not afraid to defend the run, but also is really good at dropping back into coverage and really affecting how quarterbacks can attack the middle of the field. Devin White hasn't really developed in the pass coverage part of the aspect of his game, and he's a little bit hit or miss in run defense, but he's an excellent blitzer. He's an insane athlete, and I think they do scheme him up well. But even if they don't decide to keep him next year, they have Servasia Dennis, who's also a really good athlete and can really replace him. I don't know if he'll necessarily take over early into the year. But maybe just a little bit later in the year, they might end up moving on from Devin White and having Servasia Dennis play a little bit more. But overall, I do think you're going to get very similar play between those two. If Lavonte David goes down, I would be a little bit worried about this front seven just a little bit more. But overall, I do think you still have one of the best front sevens in the entire league. It kind of just depends on Joe Troy, on Shayenka to develop, to see what we're going to get from Shaq Barrett, and to see what we get from Kalijah Cansey, to see if he can be Aaron Donald or if he's going to be Solomon Thomas. But overall, I do think you're feeling really good about this front seven. And then the secondary still has a lot of talent too. It's going to start off with Antoine Winfield, who's one of the top 10 safeties in the league, and I do think is going to really have another good year and really threaten to be considered one of the elite top 4 to 5 safeties in the year. I do think he's going to have a really big year. He was the best player on this team last year, and I think he's going to keep playing excellent for this team. He's a really great safety. Can make plays on the back end, but is also not afraid to come up and hit. So I feel good about Antoine Winfield, and as I'm saying, I'm predicting a really great year from him. And then you keep Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis as these big, aggressive press man corners on the outside. They're not quite, Jair Alexander's, Pat Surtain's, or Sauce Gardner's. But in this scheme that allows them to be really aggressive and play up on the line, they're both really good man corners. And then they got Zion McCollum in the slot, who is a very interesting piece. Was not great when he was out there on the field as a rookie, but has one of the most insane combine testing scores and RAS scores of all time. He's just an absolute freak athlete. He's got speed, agility, strength. Like, he should be an absolute freak if he's able to develop on the field and become a better, coverage player. Then you're going to be really excited about him because he might be one of the most athletic players or cornerbacks in the league. So if he develops and he hits as a 5th-round pick, then you're going to be feeling excellent about the secondary. But worst case, if he's a little bit of a liability, D. Delaney can come in and kind of be an okay option for you as a slot guy. And then Ryan Neal as the other safety is a pretty decent option. He's kind of a low-end starter, not getting a whole lot from him, but I don't think it's going to be a liability for this team. So overall, I think the only place you're really worried about this defense is kind of that slot corner. I think Lavonte David, as such a good coverage player, is going to help that spot, just play a little bit better. But I do think you're going to feel really good about this front seven, and I still think you still have 3 really good players in secondary, and that's really going to help this defense. This defense still does have a lot of the starting talent that helped them win a Super Bowl, and still have the elite talent that helped them win the Super Bowl. As they've rotated out some of these kind of, rotational pieces that helped them win, I still think they have really solid guys who can come in and play, be good role players for this defense. So overall, I do think this is going to be a top 10 defense. I think they're going to kind of have a little bit of a return to form. That's really going to help take some of the pressure off Baker Mayfield and this offense. And so overall, let's go ahead and talk about their schedule real quick. Vegas has their line at 6.5. I have them a little bit more at 7.5, but I do just have a good feeling that they're going to win a little bit more of these games. Going on the road to Minnesota, I think they can win that. Then Chicago, Philly, at New Orleans. I think they're going to win Chicago easily. I think they can beat the Saints. And Minnesota and Philly are going to be difficult games. But I think their defense still could compete with Philly. It's Philadelphia. They're coming off a Super Bowl appearance. Coming off the bye, I think they have the defense to kind of stop Detroit. I think they have the run defense to stop Atlanta. So I think they can pick up a couple games there. Having to go to Buffalo is going to be rough, but I think they can beat Houston. I think they could have the run defense to beat Tennessee. I think going to San Francisco is going to be a difficult game. But I think they'll be able to take care of Indy on the road. I think they can take Carolina at home. As I said, I think they can stop the run in Atlanta. I think they have the physicality to handle Green Bay in December. I think they'll be able to handle Jacksonville's defense as well. I don't think they have enough wide receiver talent to really stop this press man coverage. I think they'll be able to take care of New Orleans at home, and I think they're going to be able to win this game against Carolina. I think ultimately is going to end up sealing them, this division. The line's at 6.5. I see at least, Houston, Indy. I think they can win both those games. I think Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, and New Orleans at home. I think that's at least 6 wins right there. For them to win at least one of these other games, to me, seems very likely. So I think I would slam the over, unless Baker Mayfield just really is bad, which I just really think he's a better quarterback than people are giving him the credit for. I think this team is going to slam the over. I really do think that this team is the best team in the NFC South. And I do think they have the most talent overall of any of these teams in the NFC South. And what's a weak division and a weak conference, I do think they have enough talent and star talent to really compete to make the playoffs. So overall, kind of just recapping everything, we still are a little bit worried about Todd Bowles. He still has to kind of prove to us that he is a great head coach. But overall, we still do have faith of him as a defensive coordinator. But I do have a lot of hype for Dave Canales. I just have a really good gut feeling that he's going to work out and help Baker kind of restore himself to former glory. But as I'm saying, I do believe in Baker Mayfield. I truly believe that he is a starting caliber quarterback, and he can be a great quarterback in the NFL. This O-line could struggle, though, if the right side struggles and Ryan Jensen doesn't quite come back from his injury, and Tristan Wirfs can't really handle the switch over to the left side. This offensive line could struggle, but I do have a lot of faith that these guys are going to be pretty decent. And as I said, the offensive weaponry could struggle if there's injuries to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But you're injury prone until you're not. So, they could very easily play a full season and be really good players for this team. This pass rush could struggle, but I do have faith that we'll have a good year from Joe Tryon. Even with Shaq Barrett, what version of him we're getting, not fully sure. But they're going to have elite run defense and a great secondary. And when you're in a weak NFC South, I really do think they have the talent, and especially the star talent, to compete, win games, and make the playoffs. So fans of the NFC South, please tell me what you think. Am I crazy for having Tampa winning? Or am I smart and I'm about to win a lot of people a lot of money if they bet on the Buccaneers to win this division or they're over? But overall, I know I'm higher on this team, but I just have so much faith in Baker and the defense and the offensive talent that they do have, where I think they just have too much talent to ultimately be a bad team. So just go ahead and let me know what you think. If you did stick around for the entire video, please like, please subscribe, and we'll be back very, very soon with our 20th ranked team. But thank you for watching. We'll be back soon.